Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm happy to see such large numbers, and I'm really happy to be moderating this workshop today, which will be led by Corey Davis, who is the Digital Preservation Librarian at University of Victoria. Corey has generously agreed to share his knowledge on locally preserving archivate data. This is something that we've talked about quite a bit in the Digital Preservation Working Group at Carl. So I'm really happy to see it coming to fruition. And it's clearly a topic where there's a lot of interest. So before I hand it off to Corey, I'll just note that I will be keeping an eye on the Zoom chat throughout his presentation for any questions. Et si vous préférez poser vos questions en français, ça me ferait plaisir de les traduire aussi. So that's it. With that, Corey, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and thanks to Lean from Carl for making this all happen. And good to see you all. Lots of familiar names out there. Some of you I think I owe emails to, so apologies for that. But okay, I'm going to get started here. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, I'll start the slideshow, and I'm going to be going back and forth and doing a few little demos as well. So thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to be talking today about web archives. An API to get those things from US-based servers to your own institution or other places. And I realized I've added this subheading since I did the little blurb for the session about vibe coding, because we're going to be talking a lot about how we can use the new frontier language models to do a lot of this work. They're actually quite good. I'm finding through my experience. I'm not sure how other folks are finding things, but a lot of digital preservation work involves just sort of making copies of things and moving things around, getting them to different places, making sure that what you moved is the same as what you got, or the same as the copy, etc. And um, we're not building really complex web applications or anything like that. We're just really manipulating data, and vibe coding I've been finding really, really good for that type of stuff. So I'll also just say at the beginning that I don't have any specialized knowledge here that many of you um, wouldn't also have. And there's going to be lots of you on the call who will know much more about some of this stuff than I do. So please feel free to use the chat to make any clarifications or corrections to what I'm saying if you feel that your knowledge would be helpful. I'm really encouraging you all to take an active part by using the chat. And I'll ask folks to put things in the chat as we step along here. So first date I'd like to look at here is October 9th, 2024, and that's when I was about a month into a 6-month sabbatical when the Internet Archive went dark because of a distributed denial of service attack, which I think woke a lot of us up. And it's been about a year and a half now since that time, which has given us plenty of time to sort of absorb what happened. And at the same time, the world itself, especially in relation to Canada-US relations, has gotten much more complicated. And because so much of our digital infrastructure and the digital services that we use are US based, I think it's become a little bit even more complicated for Canadians specifically, just because of the rhetoric that we've been hearing from down south, etc. So this work that we do to ensure we have local custody, I think, is getting a lot more attention by federal, provincial governments. People are starting to really clue into the importance of what we do in digital preservation in terms of mitigating these large risks, not only from things like bit rot and operator error, but these and things like earthquakes when thinking Victoria, but these larger geopolitical risks that we try to hedge against by ensuring that we have local custody of material that, say, is US based. So it's really pretty simple stuff, right? It's the lots of copies keep stuff safe idea. If you're using Archive It, which is a very popular web archiving tool from the Internet Archive, or really any other kind of service, right? Like we also use Borealis from Scholars Portal as our research data repository. We use the Internet Archive, like archive.org for a lot of our digitized collections. Whenever we have critical, important collections that aren't in local custody, we want to make sure that we do have custody of copies of that material. So when it comes to the Internet Archive, they do an amazing job in terms of the robustness of their infrastructure, and we saw that in the way that they were able to get back online relatively quickly after that, the events of 2024. There's a primary and secondary copy, but both are based for the most part, I think, and I don't know if this has changed since more infrastructure has been developed in Canada in terms of data centers, but um, most of those primary and secondary backup copies of your works are going to be US based. And if anyone knows anything more about sort of the state of the art of Internet Archive, Archive it data backup, please feel free to put that in the chat. The idea here is that you can do this downloading as part of your Archive it subscription. It enables things like disaster recovery, and as we're going to be talking about as well, even quite, it's not super hard to play these things back using open source software at your local institution as well. We'll be talking a little bit about that. Our focus is going to be mostly on backing this stuff up. And really importantly, I think for decision makers and for your um, within your library or whatever context you're coming from, the importance of having custody over this material in an increasingly complex geopolitical landscape is really critical. How's the chat doing so far, Sarah? Are we lighting it up yet? Okay. Okay, that's fine. So where do you put your stuff? We're going to be talking about how to get it, but I just wanted to first mention that this doesn't need to be super complicated, even if I won't show you because I'd have to move my machine right now, but um, recently purchased a 26 terabyte external hard drive for about $500. You can have this stuff sitting on desktop. I mean, it's not the most ideal thing, but even if you're just putting these onto external drives that are sitting in your office or unplugged and sitting in a safe space, that's okay, right? If you're part of a larger organization or you have active IT support or network drives, you can put your stuff on network drives. You can put I'm thinking here in terms of folks that might be based at a university or a larger institution. Most of us have IT departments that have tape archive solutions that we could potentially use. And then, of course, there's wonderful Canadian-based storage infrastructure. I'm thinking here specifically of the Ontario Libraries Research Cloud. That won't give you local custody necessarily if you put your stuff there, but it could be part of your preservation strategy for getting things back into the country and distributed in the cloud. And then, of course, commercial cloud service providers as well, everyone from Amazon, which again is US based. So we've been steering away from using AWS Deep Glacier to a company based out of France called OVH Cloud for some of our cloud tape backup. So there's lots of different places you can put things. And again, you can use most of these things, for an external hard drive, it's going to be really simple, but for something like the OLRC or commercial cloud, you might need to use like an API or a little bit of coding. But again, using these frontier models and vibe coding, this stuff is really accessible now. So you can get things from, say, a local network drive to the OLRC by kind of reading or having something like Claude read all of the documentation and helping you build just really simple scripts to move things around. Once you have things, so these are two tools. There's a bunch out there. These are two tools that I've had a little bit of experience with. You can actually relatively easily, either through web-based sources or by downloading some simple software. Once you have those works sort of in local custody, if they're on an external hard drive or on your computer or on a network drive, there's tools like pywb, which is a very sort of stripped down, simple version of the Wayback Machine that can index those work files for you, play them back locally. This really helps me at UVic feel comfortable that if in a worst case scenario with Internet Archive, for whatever reason, everything from, the cyber attacks to weird geopolitical stuff that we have copies of the stuff and we can play the stuff back. That's what's really critical here. So there are a ton of other tools, some more complicated, some simpler that can be run on your laptop to be able to do this, or on a virtual machine provisioned by your IT department if you have a bit more infrastructure. If folks have ideas for other tools for playback locally, please put those in the chat. And I'd love to hear from people as well to where if folks are actually downloading their works and where they're putting them, if it's on local infrastructure or in the cloud. It'd be great to hear if people are using the API from Internet Archive, which we're going to get to in a minute here. Watch the time here. Oh yeah. Sorry. So the problem here is that it's really easy to manually download a few works from Archive It. Excuse me. But if you have, like I know Kent, and I think you're on the call, U of A has, University of Alberta has like 42 terabytes of collections. I don't know what that would look like actually on disk, but that's a lot of stuff. And you need to think a little bit more sophisticatedly about how to download that stuff. And for us, when we first did this about 2 years ago now, we had about 7 terabytes, and it took a long time. Like this will take a while when you're first starting up, but once you get a process in place, what you can do is initially download everything that you have per collection ID, and we're going to look at what that looks like in a moment. And then after that, you can just put a list of all your different collection IDs into a little script, and then just do it based on when you last did the download until the current date, so that you're just doing these episodic updates to your collection, so it's not as burdensome. So we do it at UVic. We do it about every 6 months. We go and grab everything new that we got. So the Internet Archive, and a lot of this was through Ian Milligan and Nick Rouet and others who are working on Archives Unleashed. Created an API for web archiving systems that basically it's a standard way to, as it says here, query, find, and download your work. So I'm just going to quickly jump over to, let's just see. Apologies, folks. So here's our Archive It dashboard. For those of you who are Archive It subscribers, this will look very familiar. And I'm just going to, today I'm going to use, you can see that we haven't done a lot of crawling yet for this period, but you can see some of our larger collections are, 3 terabytes, 4 terabytes, depending on what it might be. I'm going to look at our at-risk collection right now because it's small and I can do a live demo because there's not that much stuff in here. You can see here that we've done about this many crawls, which isn't a lot since we've had this collection. So each one of these represents a crawl. And if you use the query through WASAPI, and what I'll do is I'll just put this in, I'll put this in the chat here. Give me 2 seconds. What you can do is this, this is the collection ID at the end here. And it corresponds to this part of the URL in your, when you're in your internet, your Archive It partner interface. So if you want to go into your Archive It account now, look at one of your collections, just copy that number right there and take the URL that I put in the chat and just put that new collection number at the end. You'll see all of the WARC files associated with that collection. So this is what the API enables us to do. This is all we're going to be working with. It's as simple as that. It has a name. It has checksums. Those are really critical because each of these, there's a source file location and a backup source file location. So here are those 2 copies. The files that sit behind these copies have a unique signature based on their size. And this is that signature calculated in 2 different ways using 2 different algorithms. What that enables you to do is you download the signature with the file, and I'll show you what that looks like. And then you recalculate the file once you've downloaded it to make sure that it matches so that you know that the file that's up there, the canonical version in on US servers and Internet Archive is exactly the same thing as what you've downloaded onto your local machine or your network drive or your S3 location somewhere in the cloud. And so you can see here, all of these links here are just simply to the WARC files that were created from each one of these crawls. If the crawl is bigger than about a gigabyte, so here's one that's 2.7 gigabytes, I think the largest maximum size of a WARC file for an archive it is about a gigabyte. So this would be 3 different files here, but for these smaller ones, they'll just be individual files. So are there any questions around that? This is the API. It's really as simple as that, and you can get to it through this specific URL. Sarah, are there any questions or anything so far?
Just Kenton clarifying that it's closer to 30 terabytes for their
32,
web
yeah.
collections. And
Which I
also Dana making an excellent point that there's a black hole of time in the fine gray line between easy and hard. It's very
yeah, no
relatable.
kidding. Very relatable indeed. And really, in terms of that stuff, like you're right. I'm doing this off the side of my desk as well. And every 6 months, I revisit this thing because I forget what I did 6 months ago, right? And I vibe code a different little script. And so don't think that this needs to be perfect. It's your best effort when you have the time and when you can do it. So even if you download half of your works or just the works from a few key collections and then put them on an external hard drive in your office, and you do that once a year, you're further ahead than not at all. And of course, this needs to be contextualized with all the other fires that you're putting out in the various other parts of your world. So, it can
We do
get
also
pushed
have a
back.
suggestion,
Yeah.
Corey, for another open source tool,
Oh, great.
WARC.io, maybe. I'm
Okay.
not sure if that's the right pronunciation, but it's Python based. Can be used to programmatically read, write, and inspect a WARC file.
So, yeah, and that's the thing too. Like Archive It itself is a beautiful tool. But there are a ton of ways to grab websites. Like you can use wget with a WARC argument to create WARC files just using the command line. We're going to look at the command line here. There are so many different ways. You don't need to have a subscription to archive it. You can, and perhaps that could be a future workshop where just tools beyond things that cost money that are open source, that are free, that are available in the command line, where you can crawl and keep things and store them locally. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. Okay, I'm gonna continue on with my little song and dance here. Um, yeah, so it's really like we saw in the. I'm just gonna. Um, check the time. Yeah, we got to lots of time here. So you can see here, these are just you're basically just querying this um, this API, and you're querying it for a bunch of different things. You're also entering your username in your account to make sure that you have permissions to download and etc. But we'll show you what that looks like. But it's basically just the collection, and then there's different things that you can pull back. So I'm going to show you what it looks like in WASAPI to create what's called a manifest. So the first step, and Sarah, I'm not sure if you'd be able to, apologies, but put into the chat a URL to the WASAPI documentation from the archive. That'd be awesome. Thanks so much. Just so people can see it. It's literally just a page and there's a few other things. So it's not a super complicated thing. But what you do first with WASAPI is you query it to basically get this list downloaded in like a CSV file or something similar. You can actually do that in the interface here, but we're going to do it programmatically. So you can see here, you can download like a CSV file. And what that's called is a manifest. And what that manifest is going to do is list all of the work files that you're then going to point your downloader at. So I'm just going to show you a live demo of what I've done locally using vibe coding. So, okay, so what I've done is here's so I'm on a MacBook Pro. This is where I've done everything. And you can do this on Ubuntu machines or on Windows machines, but basically I have in my home directory, I think a directory called WASAPI, and in here I've created two simple scripts using Claude. So this is the large language model from Anthropic, and I think it's probably the best for coding right now. That's just my personal opinion. You can use things like Gemini from Google or ChatGPT, which we all know about, Copilot, etc. There's also special tools. I think I won't say any that are specifically for coding. And what I would really appreciate if folks could just take a moment, and those of you who are doing vibe coding, just put your favorite large language model in the chat, and that would be great. You can see here, this is I uploaded the script that it contained because I just wanted to double check how it was doing the checksums. And so you can see here how the conversation kind of goes. You're basically, instead of coding directly in Python, you're just talking to an agent that does that for you. So I'm going to go to my command line here. So I'm going to list all of my directories here. And you can see here, it's the same thing as right here. So these are all my directories. Here's the same thing in the command line. And I'm going to change directories and go over into WASAPI here. And then I'm going to list again. And you can see these are those two Python scripts that I've created. If I want to actually take a look at those scripts, I can use something like Visual Code Studio. Actually, I'll just open one for you right here. This is the manifest builder here. And this is what the script looks like. What I've asked Claude to do when it's coding is to be really, really verbose about um, explaining within the query what everything is doing at different points. So you can see everything, all of the different parameters that you can change, and lots of documentation within the script itself. I'll just put that down here. So this script, basically all it's doing is it's going to this web URL and doing a query. And so I'm going to talk about how I built it in a minute, but I'm just going to show you what it looks like. So to run a Python script, you just click that, and let's just see, it's the manifest builder. So I'm going to run that. I'm going to enter my user credentials here. Okay, so here's where I'm going to enter my collection ID, and I've built the script so that that I can enter multiple collection IDs if I want to do more than one collection, just separated by a comma. I have a specific kind of date filter here, either crawl time or crawl start. I tend to use crawl time instead of crawl start because they're a little bit different. And now I'm going to put a date range in. So if you don't put anything in, you get everything. I don't want everything because it would take too long to download. So I'll just do what we've crawled in the last few months here. So here's my query. It's asking me if I want to do it. I'm going to say yes. Yeah, it's testing my authentication against the WASAPI endpoint. This is where it doesn't work. Okay, there. Thank you. So, okay, so it found three files. And you can actually see what those files might be, because since January 1st to March, I've done three crawls. So it's grabbing those three files here. Just go back here, and it's telling me how big they are. And so I now have a CSV file in my directory, which is right here, that has all of the name, the URL for where it exists, and the backup URL, and byte size, and the checksums, and a bit of other information. So everything that I would need to grab that stuff. So now I'm going to download it. I'm going to list my directory structure here, and you can see I have got my WASAPI downloader script. So I'm just going to run that again. So again, now when I first did this, I didn't know how to use. When I first started vibe coding, I didn't know how to use command line. Didn't know what Python was. I mean, I had a vague idea. I didn't know how to run Python in the command line, and I just had extended conversations with the large language models to help me do that. So you can start really from scratch when you're talking to these models when you're vibe coding. You don't need to say, I want a Python script for this. You can just sort of say, here's what I want to do. Ask me questions to help me get to the point where I can actually do it. So, okay, here's the downloader. So what it's going to do, I'm just going to, you never want to hard code your credentials into. Okay, so it's asking me to choose a manifest file. If I had more than one CSV file with a list of WARCs in it, this would all show up, but I only have the one that I just created. It's got the default download directory. You can see right here that that's right there in my on my laptop, and I'm just going to press enter because that's the default. Same with the log file. Okay, so it's going to tell me it's going to download 3 files, 1.16 gigabytes, and I'm just going to press yes, and then we're going to see it doing that. What I'm going to do at the same time here is I'm actually going to open a new window. You can build all sorts of fancy things into these little scripts to help you see the progress of what's happening. So you're not just staring at this, but what I'm doing here is I'm just using this while argument that's watching this directory, and every 5 seconds, it's looking at the download directory and just telling me how much data is in there. I know that I have about 1,000 megabytes to download, and so I can see that it's progressing quite well. If I were to interrupt this, which I won't do right now, just for time's sake, I could restart it. And part of the coding, I asked it to be able to recover from network outages. And so it will pick up at the same place. It will check to see what's there. And it's got a JSON state file that can tell it exactly where it was when the network crapped out on it, basically. And that's right here. That's the state file here. So while we wait for, and this is I'm on UVic like wired infrastructure, so this is happening relatively quickly. At home, this would take maybe at my house like 20 minutes or something like that, so I wouldn't necessarily do it live. And while we watch this beautiful green and black, Sarah, how was the chat doing? There's anyone?
We just have one suggestion for another coding agent called
Okay.
Mistral or Mistral. I'm not sure I'm
Mm,
pronouncing that correctly. I haven't
yeah,
heard of that
totally.
one.
That one's awesome because you can actually run that one locally. It's open. And so you can
Hmm.
see, I don't know if people can see this little llama icon in the top of my screen here. This is the OLAMA framework that allows you to run open models locally. And Mistral is developed by a French company, and you can download some of their models depending on um, how beefy your machine is, and get some pretty amazing results. So thanks for that, whoever mentioned Mistral. There's these don't you could actually do an entirely closed sort of local open infrastructure without in terms of vibe coding without having to use commercial models. But I think it just might be, I think that the expensive online ones are probably the best right now. But again, others would know more. Okay, so we can see here that these files are downloaded, and that's really basically it. So now I have those 3 files. I have the data. I've reclaimed my bytes from this collection, from this time frame, and I now have them on local infrastructure. I've got comprehensive log reports that I can save along with them. You can see everything that I saw on my screen saved here. The report, what it did, when it did it, how it did it, and then a state file here, which would allow it to, if there was any issues with network interruption, pick up again. So if you were to run the same query again, it wouldn't overwrite the other ones. It would let you know that the files already exist on the source directory. And it's really that, I won't say it's really that simple, because to get from the point where you know nothing about Python like I was, and or how to use command line to the point where you're writing simple Python scripts, it takes a while, but it's imminently doable, is what I would say. So let's just go back to my presentation. Okay, yeah, cool. I hope to have a lot of time for conversation, or a bit of time for conversation here. So what is vibe coding? Basically, it's talking through the problem that you're trying to solve with coding using a large language model or a vision language model or multimodal frontier model, whatever you want to call Our developer used to do this for me. Our developer now can focus on the really hard stuff that I throw at him. His name's Ben. He's amazing. And he doesn't need to worry about all these weird little things that I need to do on a regular basis to move data around because I'm able to do this. So really, it's it's about describing what you need and learning how to do that. Um, Pointing the model to the documents on the internet, ideally even copy and pasting it into the context window so that it's not making things up or guessing or going to its training data, which may be out of date. And then being very, very iterative. Like, don't say, create this big complicated app that's going to do all this stuff. Start really, really small. Like, I want to create a manifest for a single collection in, using the WASAPI API or something like that. What I would love is if folks do have any resources for vibe coding that they found helpful, if they could put that in the chat, that'd be really great. Um, just a few best practices. And again, others on this call are going to know way more about this than me. So um, please, take all of this with a grain of salt. It's worked for me in our context. I'm getting good results, but whatever works for you is going to work for you. What I find is that I will let the model know what I'm about to do and start to talk to it and ask it what it might need from me. And I will copy and paste URLs and the actual text from any documentation that I want it to work from, as opposed to asking it to go just figure it out itself. And be as specific as you possibly can and ask it when it's creating any sort of scripts, no matter how simple they are, to build in a lot of comments so that you know exactly what things do. What I'll then do is look at the script, and then I've got subscriptions for a number of different models. I'll sort of set them against each other in different sections, sort of saying, like, does this make sense? Are there any problems here based on the outcomes that I want? Is there something I'm not thinking about? How would you optimize this? So that you're not just relying on one specific model, where you can go kind of back and forth between, say, something like Copilot or Claude. I tend to work between sort of ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude, with Claude being my primary one when it comes to coding. Start small and build up. Um, think about things like recovering from failure. So anytime you're interacting with the network, be sure to talk through how the code deals with that, and then iterate relentlessly and run it, refine it, repeat it, check with people that know more about you, check with other models that know more about you coding if you've got a developer on site that wouldn't mind you looking, helping out a little bit, and ask other models. So here is something just to kind of show folks. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing this because you add a layer of complexity that maybe isn't needed. But for me, because I don't know, it's just kind of fun too. The thing about vibe coding is it can be kind of fun. You start to get in the flow and the hours sort of disappear. You forget about all the trouble in the world for a little bit while you're solving these problems, these really concrete, right in front of you problems. I'm just going to show you a little bit about like what with vibe coding and the level of knowledge that I have, which isn't super high, the kind of things that you can actually do once you start to get a little bit more conversant with the tools. So, um, right. Okay, so we already did this. I showed you the manifest builder, the live demo. Okay, so now what I wanted to do is I wanted to create a web application. So just basically a user interface to do this on a browser. So I'm going to show you what that looks like now. And again, it's just basically talking to the app. So here I am in my WASAPI directory. I've got all these wonderful things downloaded. I'm going to go into my WASAPI app. So this is a really simple app. There's a README file, there's a requirements.txt file, which basically the script will point to other Python libraries or other software requirements that your machine might need and automatically download those. There's a CSS style sheet for the HTML file, and there's the index.html and um, and the code, which is that we built in the first that I built in the first iteration in this app code using I'm going to close this now, and it gets everything online using Flask. So I'm just going to change my directory and go to the WASAPI app here, list things, and again you can see here just what we looked at. So you can see that this is the same as this here, and then I'm just going to run the app and you're going to see what this looks like in my local host. So this is just running locally on my machine. It's not, my machine isn't serving this out to the World Wide Web. And here's what it looks like. So this is basically those two scripts, but with a user interface. I'm just trying to move my Zoom controls around here so I can see a little better. So just like before, I'm going to log in here, test my authentication. My collection ID, I'm going to do the same one and use crawl time. Again, we saw that before. And the same start date, the same end date. So I'm going to query WASAPI here. It's going to do that same query that we saw before. And then it's going to ask me. It seems to be a bit slow right now. So I'm glad that the first part worked because this is spinning a little bit more than I might be used to. Sarah, how's the chat looking?
Quiet, quiet so far. I think everyone's just kind of mind blown by what you're showing us.
Until now, of course. Do folks have, I find, and I don't know where the bottleneck is, but I find sometimes when I'm using Archive It that it's, especially when, and it might be, maybe it's my browser, who knows, right? You never really know, but sometimes like when I'm loading in the dashboard here, it seems to take a while, and I can see now that it's doing the same thing where it's not loading. Okay, so I got some loads there. Let's just see if okay, look at that. Magical. Okay, so I've queried, and again, the three files, 1.16 gigs. I'm going to create that manifest file. Okay, so it's saved the manifest file. It's just a CSV, man. It's just like so quick to do something like that. And then I'm going to go to the download manager, which is basically just the next tab. Got my Zoom. Okay, and so here's the manifest file. I'm just going to choose it. Again, it's showing me this, and then I'm going to start the download. And so basically, it's just going to show me. I might refine this in the future so I get a bit more granular in terms of download progress because it only shows me once one file is done and then the second file and the third file. So there isn't a lot of great feedback. You can see it's downloading here, but what I could do is I could point, right? Oh, there's so the first 200 gig file downloaded. The next one's about 700 gigs, so it'll take another second here. But what I could also do is like I mentioned before, with a new window, I could point that while, and there's other ways to do this. I could just point this at a different directory, which is in, let's just see where it is here. It's in the WASAPI app and then data. So I can just WASAPI app data. And so there's 800 megs in there already. You can see, and then see if in 5 seconds. Okay, yeah, so we can see that it's working quite well. So in like just a few seconds here, we're going to see that the second one downloaded. I'm going to stop talking really soon here so we can have a broader conversation. When I did this 6 months ago, I used like I vibe coded a different app, and I just wanted to see how the vibe coding had changed, and it gave me a better interface, but it's a little bit more complicated, which can be problematic. Like you might want to keep it super simple. Okay, so I'm done here. It's downloaded all three, so I'm going to go to reports and logs, and I can see 3 files were downloaded, 3 verified, collection ID. And then over here, this is the app again. I can see all the data. So here are my 3 files that I downloaded, the logs, the manifest file that was initially created, the state file, which would enable me to recover from a network outage. And again, these are the same, very similar to the files that we saw before. is pretty in that case. Um, Here's some reporting as well. And all of this stuff can be customized in the script itself. Okay, so let's go back to slideshow here. So next here, live demo, we did that. Yeah, so that's I won't stall on this, but there's a couple things I added to the prompt afterwards. Like I wanted to make it accessible for screen readers. Um, I wanted it to use the two scripts I built, et cetera, et cetera. So I also created a README file. Actually, what I'll do here, I'm just going to escape here. This is now I would, like use this. Here it is on GitHub. And you can, use this README file. But again, I'm vibe coding here. So, um, you know, make sure that you double check things, is I'm going to say. Uh, Vibe coding. Love it, hate it, loathe it. I'm going to put the GitHub repo. The cool thing about the repository on GitHub here is that you can download those two just really simple apps if you just want to build a manifest and then download based on your credentials and date range and collection numbers. Okay, right, so you can do this. I guess that's what I'm saying. It's imminently doable for people with zero technical abilities. It'll take a little bit longer depending, to get up to the point where you're writing and running little Python scripts, but you can do it. You can totally do it. And a few caveats, just again, never hard code credentials, test, 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 start small and review the code, look at it, use another large language model to look at it and ask for explanations. So yeah, that's all I wanted. And yeah, we have just under 15 minutes, and I just like to open it up to discussions now because there's going to be folks on this call that have done similar things and more effectively than I have who can actually code and stuff like that. So yeah, I've got a couple, questions here. If folks want to consider them. Sarah, maybe I'll pass it over to you to sort of stick handle the next little bit here.
Yeah, for sure. We do actually have a question in the chat from Amber, who's asking, is there an opportunity to convert or extract data from WARCs as part of this too? Like you showed the CSS and HTML in the optional structure.
Oh, to actually pull things out of the works themselves.
I think that's what they mean, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Amber, if you wanna clarify, feel free.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi Corey. That's exactly it. Yeah. You've just shown like such an amazing workflow for structuring like that. That's great. I basically anyone can do it. Like a researcher could do this. Like I'm just
Mhm.
wrapping my head around. Yeah. So then do you ever get complaints like that? And I know that this has been something that's a topic within the web archiving community is around data preservation or like how to
Mm.
extract any kind of like a open or more sort of reusable format for text extraction, like
Yeah,
anything from within that is considered data in that sense. And I'd like, can you just, I never have a chance to really chat with you or to think about that. And I, can you share about that, how reuse can maybe be considered as part of this archiving?
totally. Thanks, Amber. And I'll answer as best I can. If others have thoughts on this, please raise your hand or use the chat. Um, we have considered at UVic releasing some of our, especially our government work data on the Borealis platform as research data. We haven't done that yet. In terms of extracting data out of that, you can do the same thing using Python scripts. So just as an example, I did a retrieval augmented generation RAG pipeline on web archives based on the work. I think I'm still sharing my screen here. based on WARC GPT from Harvard Library Innovation Lab, which is a tool basically that allows you to download your works locally and then um, embed them in a way that you can then query them for semantic similarity and then feed chunks into large language models. So it's like a chatbot that sits above your web archives. And to do that, you need to extract the data from it. And for that specific, the development that I did locally around that, I used a Python library called Beautiful Soup to do that. And so you can, like the work files contain all of the PDFs, all of the HTML, all of the CSS, all of the JavaScript, everything that was captured for the content and the rendering of that page is in there, and you can use scripts to get it out again. So you could potentially, like, just as an example, we crawl every local government website in the province of British Columbia once a year. That's the sort of almost 4 terabyte size collection. Dan has been a part of a lot of those efforts. She's on the call from VIU right now, and others on the call, I'm sure. And there are hundreds of thousands of PDFs in those works. We could like we could sort of isolate those works from that collection on a local machine that we have some GPU on, and basically say, give us all the PDFs or give us all of the HTML, whatever it might be, and then do fancy stuff with like vision language models and large language models for like named entity recognition, um, metadata extraction, embedding for some kind of RAG pipeline, etc. So there's lots of possibilities here. And I think as people see more and more web archives at our collections as data, hopefully more of this stuff will become available on data platforms like Borealis and Furter, so that researchers can do that. I'll also say that Archive It itself has research services that can help researchers do that. Sarah, could you put sorry to, but you know what? I'll put a link to the researcher services in the chat. So I'm not sure if anyone else has any comments or questions around that.
Just a couple comments in the chat, actually, pointing towards the Archives Unleashed toolkit, which apparently also can extract data from works.
Yeah,
So
there are so many different ways to do it. And once you have this data, you can really start. It becomes much more powerful, and it becomes data as opposed to stuff that you read by navigating through the Wayback Machine.
we have a question from Kenton in the chat who's asking, do you have thoughts on how the Internet Archive data deduplication within their system impacts replay of these works in systems beyond Archive It? I'm still trying to get my head around how that would work, especially with large collections that span many years. That's a really good question.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I'm finding the like when I use pywb to play back Internet Archive created works as opposed to works that I just create myself through the command line using something like wget, the playback's much more challenging because of that issue. Do you have thoughts on that, Kenton? Or
I don't have thoughts,
yeah,
but it seems to me that I guess I do have thoughts if I'm commenting. But it seems to me that you would have to almost download the entire collection and replay it,
yeah,
almost at the collection level for it to fully work. Like it's not a big deal if you're talking just sort of one-off seed crawls or really tiny collections, but some of our collections go back decades and they're just massive.
and that's sort of the issue, right? To get say pywb working locally on our, like you said, our UVic domain crawl, which is like 5 terabytes, that would all have to be accessible. Like pyweb would have to index all that first, and so that would be interesting. Yeah.
There's a question from Nathalie in the chat as well, who's asking, do you appraise/reappraise web collections before exporting the WARCs? Or is all the content in your web archive collections exported and locally hosted/preserved?
Here, let me share again. A little bit. And again, I would point to institutions like U of A, Kenton, U of T, even not even, sorry, but I'm just thinking my colleagues here in BC, I know Dan is on the call, where people think about this more. I tend to be more technically oriented, but what we do is um, for our collections, because you need to know if there's new collections to download the works, we have very much scaled back our collecting activities so that we don't have a bunch of little one-off collections that are much harder to manage over time. And what I would say is if we had fewer resources right now, I would only focus on 2 or 3 of our top collections. I wouldn't worry about getting everything. So for example, if I wanted to start, what I would start with is our University of Victoria websites, which is a record of, an institutional, it's not a record. It's not considered a record in the archives context, but this is a high value collection for us. So I would capture this before I did something like, Hornby Island, BC mountain biking trails, which are super cool. But so I would just focus on this one collection and I would go kind of year by year. So I would download it in chunks so that I'm not trying to download a terabyte at a time, which can take days and days and days, and it just adds to the complexity. But yeah, you don't need to download everything. That's the beautiful thing about WASAPI is you can just say, you know what, we're not going to worry about all of our collections. It's okay if some of the stuff doesn't survive like a major event, but this stuff is important to us.
And Dana also added that at VIU, they also select among their collections for preservation, so they don't preserve everything.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Oh, yeah, that's great. Yeah, we like there's some really high value stuff we have through the CGI, the Canadian Government Information Digital Preservation Network, which uses Archive It to grab Canadian government docs. So there's a private locks network that's behind that, but it's some issues right now. And so with that stuff, I'm grabbing local copies, I'm keeping them on local enterprise spinning disk, tape, and 2 geo-replicated copies, one outside of Canada as well. So for some stuff, you're going to want just more than a local copy. Like I think of, yeah, sorry, I'll get into that. But there's lots of copies that may be more at risk than others if you think of some of the types of collections that we have and some of the types of communities and collections we've seen targeted in other jurisdictions. There are going to be some types of collections where you're going to want to make sure that you have extra protection on them, extra copies.
Well, we have a couple minutes left. If there's any more questions, anyone wants to share about their experience or just react. Personally, I'm really impressed, Corey, with what you've managed to do with vibe coding and things just like creating a web app. That thought never crossed my mind, but it is something that it does come up and in my workplace where not everyone is familiar or comfortable with the command line, and that would be actually a really smart way to get everyone on the same workflow. So thank you for the inspiration. This is really great.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks to everyone who tuned in.